Sports 1 hour from now on You Better You Bet Countdown to Kickoff and a bunch of other things to get into. So let's get into it, right? Let's get the 5 biggest stories of the day right off the top. The high 5. Hit it, Grant.
5.
Bengals bring 4. Jackson towards the end zone, and it is caught. Flowers for the Ravens touchdown.
That was Lamar Jackson towards the end of the season as the Ravens scratched and fought and clawed their way back into the AFC North race after that pitiful start to the season. And now his coach is gone. Todd Monken is gone. He'll be coaching in the same division. They've got a new coach. Jesse Minter was announced earlier this week. And yesterday it was announced the Baltimore Ravens, they've got their OC as well. And by NFL coaching standards, he's a kid. He's 29. Declan Doyle has been hired as the Baltimore Ravens' new offensive coordinator, coming from the same job in Chicago. And you go, well, wait a second. Is this a lateral move? What's going on? Well, Declan Doyle in Chicago wasn't necessarily calling the plays on game day. In Baltimore, he'll be taking over as the primary play caller on offense. And more importantly, he'll be counted on to get another MVP-level season out of Lamar Jackson. It's happened a couple of times before in Baltimore where Lamar Jackson has had elite seasons off the back of a change at offensive coordinator. Can the Ravens do the same this year? Again, all new coaching staff, new OC, who's actually the same age as Lamar Jackson, 29. And with Lamar's peak not extending, it's not getting any longer, it's getting shorter, 30, right out there on the horizon. This guy's going to be counted on, Declan Doyle, to get the best out of Lamar, to not forget to use Derrick Henry, which Todd Monken sometimes fell into that trap, and to maximize what they have on the offensive side of the ball in Baltimore. You heard the touchdown pass to Zay Flowers there. There's Rashad Bateman, the aforementioned Derrick Henry. They have pieces. Isaiah Likely. I assume Mark Andrews will be back. Maybe that's a big assumption. I don't know. But they've got weapons. Can Declan Doyle come in and help Lamar Jackson maximize those weapons in an AFC North that has been full of upheaval in this offseason, including in Baltimore? Question in Chicago now. If this guy was key to helping Caleb Williams make the leap forward that he did this year, how does it affect Caleb Williams, Ben Johnson, and the Bears' offense going forward? But if Declan Doyle can replicate any of the success he and Ben Johnson had in Chicago, helping Caleb Williams unlock a lot with the Bears' offense this year, in Baltimore with Lamar Jackson, the Ravens are going to be in pretty decent shape. Next.
4.
Here's Williams in the pocket. Williams trying to get out of the pocket. He won't. Loses the ball, and the Steelers jump on top of it. It's a touchdown, and it's T.J. Watt.
Iron Eagle on the call of Steelers and, well, those Chicago Bears earlier this year on CBS. And T.J. Watt did not have a Defensive Player of the Year caliber season in Pittsburgh. Played well, but not, again, a guy who performed at his peak. And they've got a new defensive coordinator in Pittsburgh now as well. I mentioned all the upheaval in the AFC North. Obviously, 3 of the 4 head coaches have turned over. That means, again, all new staffs in Cleveland, Baltimore, and Pittsburgh, where Mike McCarthy has hired Patrick Graham as his defensive coordinator. Another guy making what seemingly on the surface feels like a lateral move, although Pete Carroll was out in Vegas and there were no guarantees that Graham was going to be held over from one coach to another, as he had been a couple of times in Las Vegas. From everyone I've talked to, though, Graham has a stellar reputation for putting up with a lot of nonsense in Vegas. Talked to Packers offensive assistant Luke Getsy the other day, and he said Patrick was the perfect steadying voice in that building when there was seemingly so much chaos in Vegas. Luke didn't call it that. He just mentioned very vaguely the culture in Vegas and how it may not have always been the best. But that's been plain to see over, the last 2 decades now. So Graham is a steadying, calming influence. Is that necessarily what the Steelers' defense needs? I don't know. I think what the Steelers' defense needs is to get younger and to continue to maximize the talent of the young pieces that they have brought in over the last few years. Derek Harmon up front on the defensive line, Nick Herbig and Jack Sawyer as the backups to T.J. Watt and Alex Highsmith on the edges, Joey Porter Jr. at corner. Can they make the most of what should be a transitioning defense? Will Cam Hayward stick around for another year, a seemingly ageless wonder? If he does, can Patrick Graham maximize T.J. Watt, Cam Hayward, Jalen Ramsey, Patrick Queen, get the most out of, again, a transitioning defense? If not, the Steelers are going to be in trouble because we still don't know what the answer at quarterback is in Pittsburgh. Maybe Aaron Rodgers for another year? Maybe Will Howard? Maybe a reclamation project of some sort? But the upheaval and the turnover in the AFC North continues as new coaches are trying to pin down their staffs. Next.
3.
Yeah, feeling good. Got out there moving around some good bit today, and I was able to do some of the jog through, so feeling good and looking forward to be ready to go. And this is the game you dream of playing in, so looking forward to getting out there and getting a chance to play in the Super Bowl.
Drake May earlier in the week talking about how he was feeling with that reported shoulder injury that's being debated just how serious it is behind the scenes. The 2 quarterbacks in Super Bowl 60 have each had pretty distinct and unique paths to this game. Maybe Mays isn't quite as unique as Sam Darnold's. His reclamation has been well documented and I think could be a template for someone going into next year. But who? I think we can get into that conversation just a little bit later, before noon. Maybe it's a Malik Willis. Maybe it's a Kyler Murray, a Tua Tagovailoa. I have another name in mind that I think is worth bringing up in about 30 minutes in regards to who could follow the Darnold path of breathing fresh life into their career. But as for May, I think that's another template. Maybe not quite as unique. We've seen other second-year quarterbacks get to the Super Bowl. That's not the unique part. I think the unique part is being a part of a team that clawed its way up out of the basement after a terrible season last year. And Drake May has been a huge part of that. Was right there in the MVP discussion for the entire back half of the season alongside Matthew Stafford. Is there someone who can make that leap next year like May did this year as a second-year quarterback? I mean, the 3 names that exist out there are Dart, Shuck, and Ward. And I think it's worth kicking around the idea of which of those 3 is in the best position to make that leap. My case would be for Cam Ward. You get Brian Daboll in there as the Titans' new offensive coordinator. He played much better in the second half of the season than he did in the first half of the season. Actually, last 7 games versus first 10, his numbers were vastly improved. You get some new weapons in there for him to throw to. And you focus on not asking Cam Ward to go out and win you games. Again, we hate to use the phrase manage the game at the quarterback position, but I think that could be a big part of how Cam Ward is that second-year quarterback who maybe doesn't get to a Super Bowl as May has this year, but makes that leap forward. I know people in New Orleans are going to say, oh, did you see what Tyler Shuck did down the stretch? That was growth. Yeah, he might lose his offensive coordinator, Scott Tolzien, interviewing with the aforementioned Steelers later this week. And Jackson Dart, all the potential in the world. But that staff turns over. Maybe for the better, obviously, with John Harbaugh coming in. And he gets Neighbors back and a healthy Scadaboo. So is Dart the one that you put a pin in for next year to make that leap in the second season? I think there's points to be made for all three. I'd go with Cam Ward. Next.
2.
Not much. I try not to have a whole lot of concern. I just want to try to prepare the football team and make sure that everybody's ready and that we all have a plan, and not to surprise anybody, and make sure that our guys are focusing on the first and second down plan. I know that's, we've tried to map out the week here or week and a half and not look at the end of it, but focus on what we can do today. Try to learn our opponent and be ready for first and second down.
Mike Vrabel earlier in the week talking about getting ready for Super Bowl 60, not being worried about Drake May's shoulder, and how they'll offensively game plan for this thing. Patriots offense needs work. Averaging just 18 points a game in the playoffs, 4.35 yards per play in the postseason, just 178 yards passing per postseason game, and less than 15 first downs per game. They've won off the back of their defense. They haven't had to score a ton of points. And that's not going to work against Seattle. I don't see how New England scores more than 20 against Seattle. I don't see how the New England offense controls this game, especially with May being less than 100%. The Seattle defense has been the best in the league most of the year. Yeah, they've had their hiccups. But that was against some pretty good offenses when they did have those hiccups. I'm looking at the LA Rams in particular. I don't think Drake May and the Patriots offense is inducing any of those hiccups in the Seattle defense. And I think if New England's counting on just going in there and outscoring Seattle, it's not going to work out for them. There's a reason they're the Dogs next Sunday. They can't score like that. At least they haven't been able to in the playoffs. Which brings us to next.
1.
Third and 8 is picked off, intercepted by, speaking of Josh Wallace, there is Josh Wallace, and he will take it to the 1-yard line.
Al Michaels on Amazon Prime, Week 16. Remember how ugly it was for Sam Darnold? That pick right there gave the Rams the ball, and on the doorstep, they went in for a touchdown and went up by 16 in that game. And Sam Darnold stopped seeing ghosts in the fourth quarter in overtime. Stormed back to win that game in overtime. Won the number 1 seed for Seattle, which paved the road to the Super Bowl for the Seahawks. The fourth quarter and overtime, that Week 16 game, are when Sam Darnold flipped the switch. And it's been on since then, really. But what happens if somebody does turn the lights out on Sam Darnold? What happens if Sam Darnold does start to see ghosts again? I'm not going to let go of that meme. I'm sorry. Even if he's proven me wrong over the last month, I think that possibility is always still there with Darnold. And I think New England could be the defense to bring it out of Darnold. For as good as he has been this season, especially the postseason, we know Darnold does have a tendency to turn into a pumpkin from time to time. Jeff Schwartz was on You Better You Bet with us the other day and said, if Darnold doesn't have a pumpkin game, the Seahawks win. If you want to simplify the formula for Super Bowl 60, and I think he's right. But I think the pumpkin effect is being somewhat sidelined and left off the radar. Maybe it'll heat up here in the week leading up to the game. But Darnold did turn the ball over 20 times this year. 14 interceptions, third most in the league. 8 of those 14 interceptions happened when he was under pressure. And the Patriots' pass rush has been dominant in the playoffs. A 52% pressure rate. For comparison's sake, the highest pressure rate by any team in the NFL in the regular season was Minnesota with 45%. So imagine the Vikings defense on, like, turbo, nitrous, jacked up. 52% pressure rate. Now, the Seahawks have done a great job of keeping Darnold clean for the most part. Clint Kubiak has done a good job of getting Darnold out of the pocket with play action and simplifying the reads for him. But this New England defense, Milton Williams, Chason, Carlton Davis, Christian Gonzalez, this is the kind of multi-layered defense that can force Sam Darnold into bad decisions and big mistakes. And if those happen, that opens the door for bad things for the Seattle Seahawks and maybe, just maybe, a pathway to victory for the New England Patriots. Welcome into You Better You Bet Countdown to Kickoff. Chris Mack in for Nick Kostos here on Westwood One Sports. You can always join the conversation as well at 310-840-4910 on Sirius XM Channel 375 as well. Now that we understand just how hard it may be for New England to win next Sunday, let's start to dig into that path of how they pull off an upset. I'll give you the best possible path to victory, plus a weird trade in the NBA. All next here on Westwood One Sports.
We'll be right back with You Better You Bet Countdown to Kickoff, presented by BetMGM. Make it legendary.
This is You Better You Bet, presented by BetMGM.
What is the path to victory for the New England Patriots next Sunday in Super Bowl 60? Started to outline it just a little bit in the high five at the top of the show, but I want to go a little bit more in depth on how New England, I think, has one path to winning Super Bowl 60. It's going to be a difficult road to navigate, but I think they can. We'll get into that in just a moment here on You Better You Bet. Countdown to kickoff, counting down to Super Bowl 60 week out there in the Bay Area. Chris Mack in for Nick Kostos, who will be live from Radio Row on You Better You Bet from 9 a.m. to noon Eastern every day this week. Westwood One Sports, your home for Super Bowl 60. You can always listen inside the Westwood One Sports app and on Sirius XM channel 375. Coming up at the top of the hour, as soon as the confetti is done falling, all 32 teams will officially be on the same page, looking forward to the offseason. Some teams are already in the thick of it, obviously. But all 32 teams will be on the same path again as soon as the confetti hits the ground at Levi Stadium. Ryan Wilson, NFL draft analyst of CBS Sports, and the With the First Pick pod will join me to talk about what the path towards the draft looks like at certain positions for certain teams, and maybe some surprises as well. Before we get into Super Bowl 60, though, and the Seahawks and the Patriots and how New England can upset Seattle, you're waking up this morning, you're getting your cup of coffee, maybe you got some errands to run. We appreciate you taking us with you wherever you're going or whatever you're doing. Maybe you're just relaxing, okay? But whatever you're doing, you're scanning the headlines from overnight. And there was one that caught me by surprise because we're all waiting with the NBA trade deadline on Thursday for a possible Giannis Antetokounmpo deal, right? The Bucks and Giannis have finally come together and said, okay, it's probably best if we part ways. And so, especially if you're a basketball fan, an NBA fan, you wake up and you immediately check, did it happen? What happened while I was asleep? Well, a trade happened, but not that one. The Cavaliers are trading DeAndre Hunter to the Sacramento Kings for Dennis Schroeder and Keon Ellis. It's a 3-team deal that also includes the Bulls getting Dario Saric and 2 future second-round picks. And I don't think you have to be a hardcore NBA fan to see this headline, read the first paragraph or two of the news and go, wait, what? What's going on here? Charles Barkley had a similar reaction last night on ESPN.
I'm disappointed, because like I said, I'm a big DeAndre Hunter fan. But if you're a big fan, why don't you like him going to Sacramento? They're not relevant. If he's a good player. They're not relevant. But if they're trying to build good players. Oh, yeah, we're not. Well, listen, brother. We're not living in the future.
We're not living in the future. Cleveland is, I guess. Look, Sacramento, yeah, as Chuck just outlined there, they're always living in the future, unfortunately, for Kings fans, it feels like. Cleveland, though, I don't think should be living in the future. I don't know. This doesn't add up for me. Keon Ellis, I think, okay, can play a role in whatever their postseason looks like. But he hasn't shot as well this season. And this just doesn't strike me as the kind of move. A year after acquiring DeAndre Hunter at the deadline, the Cavs flip him around and trade him out. It felt like it feels like the Cavs wanted to do something and they settled on this. This isn't the kind of move, and I get it. The NBA trade deadline this year is basically Giannis and then not much else. Totally get it. But this doesn't feel like the kind of move that moves the needle for the Cavs when we talk about their postseason possibilities. Just doesn't. And as Chuck outlined there, DeAndre Hunter going to Sacramento. Have fun. Interesting, though, that we woke up to that this morning as that trade happened last night in the NBA. Back to Super Bowl 60, though, because I think there's a very specific path forward for the New England Patriots to win Super Bowl 60 next Sunday. But it's a difficult path unless you believe that, as we talked about earlier, as we talked about on Friday with Jeff Schwartz, unless you believe this could be, as Jeff called it, a pumpkin game for Sam Darnold. He turns back into a pumpkin. I think that if you're the New England Patriots, step one in your plan next Sunday has to be not waiting for Sam Darnold to turn back into a pumpkin, forcing him to turn back into a pumpkin. Throwing as much as you can at him. Different looks. Different coverages. Different blitzes. And being that team that you've been in the postseason when you've jacked up the pressure rate over 50%. Get in Darnold's face. Force a turnover. Do something with it. Because, again, as we've talked about, New England's offense is not going out there and scoring more than 20 points without some help. If this is a totally, for the most part, totally clean ball game next Sunday, and neither quarterback makes any critical mistakes, Seattle's going to win by 10. But this is where Mike Vrabel and the Patriots defense comes in. And this is where the ghosts that always lurk in the back of Sam Darnold's head come in. If they can show him things that they haven't done at all yet this year, nothing that he will have seen on film, cook up something exotic, force Sam Darnold into a turnover, do something with it, put points on the board out of it, and then force him into another one. It's going to take a multiple turnover game by Sam Darnold for the Patriots to win this game. But that path, I don't think, is quite as unlikely as some people would want you to believe. Like, Sam Darnold is a great story. I don't want to get away from that, how great it's been to see Sam Darnold put his career back together over the last 2 years. It really has been something to watch. But it's still in there. And even if he plays a flawless game in the Super Bowl, even if Sam Darnold throws for 303 touchdowns, no picks, and the Seahawks beat the Patriots 31-13 and dominate from start to finish, and Sam Darnold wins MVP, I think, unfortunately, because of the way his career started, that's always going to be in there. Look at the biggest regular season game the Seahawks played this year. At home against the Rams on Thursday Night Football. We played one of the highlights earlier. It was a Josh Wallace interception that he nearly ran back for a pick six off of Sam Darnold. The first 3 quarters of that game were terrible from Sam Darnold. I remember tweeting out the gif of Sam Darnold going, I'm seeing ghosts out there, and saying, well, Sam Darnold has re-entered the chat. It very quickly became a freezing cold take because about an hour later, the Seahawks had won because Sam Darnold had a fantastic fourth quarter in overtime that locked up the 1 seed in the NFC. But that's the first 3 quarters of that game against the Rams, and the way Chris Shula twisted up Sam Darnold mentally in the first 3 quarters of that game, that's still out there. That's still a possibility. And I don't want to lead anybody to believe for a second that the Patriots aren't cooking up new schemes, new looks, new blitzes, new coverages to force Sam Darnold into mental gymnastics after the snap. Now, some of this does pivot back then to how is the Seahawks offense going to simplify things for Darnold so that when the exotic blitzes and looks come, things that maybe he's never seen before, we're not asking him to stand back there like a sitting duck and dissect the entire 53-yard width of the field. Play action. Roll them out. And if you're looking at, as we do on You Better You Bet, player props, I think Seattle would be really smart to lean on the run game. Lean on Kenneth Walker, who has also had a really good postseason. Get him the ball early and often. And it doesn't have to be 4.5, 5 yards a clip. Just keep feeding him the football regularly enough. Maybe you wear down the Patriots' front seven a little bit, and you keep some of that pressure off of Sam Darnold. Put yourself in those third and manageables that coaches love to talk about. Win on first and second down, like Mike Vrabel mentioned earlier. It's part of the focus for the Patriots and their run up to Super Bowl 60. It's part of the focus for every coach. Because every coach wants to avoid third and long. Every coach wants to be in 3rd and 2 and 3rd and 3. Because the playbook is wide open then. So we're not breaking any new ground here. But the Patriots need to break new ground in how they force Seattle into those 3rd and long situations. And then take advantage of Darnold in those situations. Take away JSN. Force him to check the ball down. Force him to make plays on the move. That is the path forward for the New England Patriots to somehow winning their 7th Super Bowl title. Because if they play this straight up, their defense is good, no doubt. But if they don't go out of their way to force multiple mistakes from Darnold, they will not win this game. If Sam Darnold does not turn the ball over more than once, the Seahawks win, and I think win comfortably. The only path for the Patriots is to force Darnold into many mistakes, and for some of those to be big turnovers that put Drake May and the Patriots offense on short fields and score them points without having to put together long drives against that Seattle defense, because they won't be able to. That's the path for the Patriots. Coming up top of the hour, Ryan Wilson, NFL draft analyst of CBS Sports, as we start to pivot towards the offseason in the NFL, which with the Super Bowl 7 days away, the offseason is just 8 days away. But coming up next, these reclamation project quarterbacks like Sam Darnold, who have breathed new life into their careers. Who's the next one? I got a couple names on the tip of my tongue and one that you may not expect. Next, here on You Better You Bet's Countdown to Kickoff on Westwood One Sports.
We'll be right back with You Better You Bet Countdown to Kickoff, presented by BetMGM. Make it legendary.
This is You Better You Bet, presented by BetMGM.
Super Bowl 60 is just a week away. And the quarterback favored to win in Santa Clara, Sam Darnold, has breathed new life into his career. Which quarterback has the best chance to maybe replicate the result next year? We'll get into that in just a second here on You Better You Bet. Countdown to kickoff, counting down to kickoff of the final week of the 2025-2026 NFL season out in Santa Clara. Nick Kostos, You Better You Bet, will be live from Radio Row all week long. And Westwood One Sports, of course, is your home for Super Bowl 60. We'll get back into that Sam Darnold question in just a moment. But like I said earlier, it's Sunday morning, you're waking up, you're trying to figure out what you may have missed. And this one, there's a good chance you missed it because, well, it happened on the other side of the globe in what was the middle of the night, very early morning for most of us.
Carlos Alcaraz. It's his night for history at the Australian Open.
6-3, 7-5.
The fastest to win the four biggest trophies in the sport.
Carlos Alcaraz finally gets the better of Novak Djokovic on hard court. Had beaten him on grass, had beaten him on clay, had not beaten him in multiple opportunities on hard court. Did it down at the Australian Open overnight and is the fastest man to a career Grand Slam in history. No doubt that Alcaraz is the best in the world right now, but Djokovic always has the capability of stepping up in those moments. Thought he might. He did not. Alcaraz wins, and he is your 2026 Australian Open champion again, completing the career Grand Slam at just 22 years, 272 days old. And he had just come off that 5.5-hour marathon against Alexander Zverev in the semifinal 2 days earlier. This one a little shorter, just over 3 hours, although it did take 4 sets after losing the first, but Alcaraz is your Aussie Open champ. So back into Super Bowl 60. Sam Darnold, we just talked about, is the linchpin to this whole thing. If he doesn't have his pumpkin moment, his pumpkin game, then the Seahawks win. It's that simple. Not to oversimplify it, but it's that simple. And when you look at the way Darnold has breathed new life into his career, I think you have to ask, is this a formula going forward? I've asked a couple people that this week, and most of them, I don't want to say they've poo-pooed my idea, and that's fine. I don't take it personally. But they've kind of looked at it as, I don't know how likely that is, Chris. Let's be honest. And again, I don't take it personal. I think there is a little bit of a pivoting happening in the NFL right now. I mean, we're staring at a Super Bowl with Sam Darnold and Drake May as the starters at quarterback. That's not a knock on either one of them. Again, Darnold has had a great postseason, and May was in the MVP conversation. It's not a knock on either one of them. But there's no Joe Burrow, there's no Lamar Jackson, there's no Josh Allen. Run down the list of quarterbacks. No Jalen Hurts, no Patrick Mahomes, no Matt Stafford. So we don't have the big names at quarterback that we're used to. Both of these teams are here because of their defenses. Seattle's best in the league most of the year. New England's arguably the best in the playoffs. That's why each of these teams are here. So if you have a really good defense, can you make a run with just a good quarterback? And again, I'm not trying to discount what Sam Darnold has done this year, because he has been great at times. Very good more often than not. Now, there are quarterbacks in what is an offseason pretty devoid of available quarterback talent, whether it be the draft, who we'll talk to Ryan Wilson about at the top of the hour, or free agency or possible trade. This is not a deep offseason for quarterback talent. But is there somebody out there who, in the right situation with the right coaching and a really good defense on the other side of the ball, could make a run next year, put a fresh coat of paint on their career? And there's names that you immediately think of as far as being available. Kyler Murray, Malik Willis, Tua Tagovailoa. I think Tua's tough because we've seen that the physicality of the game has eaten him alive. I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if once they sort their head coaching situation in Arizona, Tua ends up there and Kyler Murray maybe ends up in Miami. Not via trade so much as Tua gets released, the Cardinals sign. I mean, a lot of it lines up. I could be totally wrong, but that seems to make a lot of sense. I did mention the other day, though, on You Better You Bet, that Kyler Murray in a place like Minnesota with an excellent defense and a quarterback whispering head coach like KOC, that could be a guy that I could see breathing new life into his career at his next stop. I don't know if it happens for Kyler in Miami. And Minnesota also has to come to the decision that they're giving up on J.J. McCarthy, if that's the case. So there aren't a lot. I said there's not a lot of great quarterback talent. There's also not a lot of great situations where this could easily happen in 2026. I will throw out another name, though, and a possible situation for that name. Mac Jones. It's not, I didn't say it was going to be sexy, okay? Mac Jones, who stepped in and performed really well, I think, in Brock Purdy's absence this year for the Niners. That's a guy that you put him in the right system. A West Coast style offense, a really smart play caller on offense, and more than just an average defense on the other side of the ball. I think Mac Jones could be that guy. Now, the question then becomes, okay, Chris, where are you putting him? Where is he going to go? This is going to sound, because we don't know what their quarterback situation is right now. I promise this is not a homer take for those of you that know him from Pittsburgh. What about the Steelers? Again, it's not sexy, but the Steelers' quarterback position over the last half decade has basically been a marriage of convenience with whoever it's been from year to year since the retirement of Ben Roethlisberger. It's basically been like two divorcees at a hotel bar away on business, and they kind of look down the bar at each other and they go, yeah, you're not great, but you'll do. Whether it was Russell Wilson or Justin Fields or this past year, Aaron Rodgers, the Steelers have been on that path at the quarterback position. Now it's entirely likely Aaron Rodgers may be back in 2026. There's a lot more chatter and scuttlebutt about that happening, and he's expected to make his decision relatively early this offseason as opposed to last year. before free agency kicks off, in fact. So it's entirely possible a month from now this conversation is null and void, and the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to try to ride another year with Aaron Rodgers. And with his connection with McCarthy, I guess you can make some sense out of it in a year, again, that's completely devoid of quarterback talent. But Mac Jones in a Mike McCarthy offense, if Aaron Rodgers decides he doesn't want to play again, I wouldn't be the least bit surprised to see the Pittsburgh Steelers take a swing at that. If they're not yet ready to just hand the keys to Will Howard. Because, again, their ownership always thinks they're really in it, even if they aren't. That would be, if Rodgers decides to retire, the veteran reclamation project that I think makes some sense. Mac Jones to Pittsburgh as a stopgap starter while Will Howard continues to learn. If Rodgers isn't back. Coming up, the Senior Bowl yesterday, Garrett Nussmeier, MVP. That's in the rearview mirror. The Combine is now just 3 weeks away. So how is this year's draft shaping up? Ryan Wilson, NFL draft analyst for CBS Sports, was down in Mobile all week. He'll join us next here on You Better You Bet, Countdown to Kickoff.
Bet Countdown to Kickoff.
Some pressure, though. Hit as he throws. Man open. Guess who? Smith and Jigba. Touchdown, Seattle.
From sides to totals to props, we've got you covered.
Taken off is May. Drake May to the end zone for the New England touchdown.
It's You Better You Bet Countdown to Kickoff, presented by BetMGM on Westwood One Sports.
Chris Mack in for Nick Kostos on You Better You Bet Countdown to Kickoff, presented by BetMGM. Make it legendary. We are live on Westwood One Sports, inside the Westwood One Sports app, and of course, all over North America on SiriusXM Channel 375. We appreciate each and every single one of you for joining us. You can always jump in the conversation as well. 310-840-4910. 310-840-4910. We will talk draft in just a moment after the completion of yesterday's Senior Bowl in Mobile with Ryan Wilson. But quick news, John Clark reporting that sources are confirming Vic Fangio, Eagles defensive coordinator, is considering retirement. Eagles are apparently considering, according to this report, Jim Schwartz and Jonathan Gannon to replace Fangio. So more offseason upheaval and maybe another new coordinator in Philly, where they just named a new offensive coordinator a couple days ago. Something to keep an eye on as we continue here today on Westwood One Sports, leading you up to Super Bowl 60 on Sunday. Your home for the Super Bowl is Westwood One Sports. And as soon as the confetti hits the ground, all 32 teams will be in the same boat. Seattle and New England will join the other 30 and starting to prepare for the 2026 NFL season. And the Combine is just 3 weeks away. And like I said, the Senior Bowl in Mobile yesterday, Garrett Nussmeier named MVP. Ryan Wilson, NFL draft analyst for CBS Sports, host of the With the First Pick pod, is one of the best when it comes to breaking down the draft. Glad to have you this morning, Ryan, I guess this afternoon now, after your week in Mobile. What was your biggest takeaway from watching the guys that you did get to see work this week down there?
Hey, Chris, good to see you as always, man. It's that time of year. I think we're 80-something days until be in your hometown, Pittsburgh, PA, for the 2026 NFL Draft. Crazy times indeed. Biggest takeaway from Mobile for me, the defense stood out. And the quarterback class wasn't where we needed it to be. You mentioned Garrett Nussmeier won player MVP of the game, and that's great. And sometimes it's hard to get a real takeaway for these quarterbacks. A few years ago, we had Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr. At the Senior Bowl, and no one really set the world on fire. Both guys ended up being first-round picks. So this isn't the end of the conversation for these quarterbacks. But defensively, we saw a bunch of dudes. And one of my favorite players, I had watched him prior to the Senior Bowl and liked him a lot. Got a chance to talk to him and then watch him play. And you know this guy really well, Kyle Lewis, the tweener at Pitt. Mm-hmm. And this man, to quote our buddy Brian McFadden, plays football with bad intentions. And we saw that for 3 practices. I had a chance to talk to him about some of the things that he thought he did well over the course of the season for Pitt and some things he was working on. And one of the things he's so good at, he's great in coverage. He weighs 220, so he gives you that sort of new age versatile chess piece that can play both linebacker and then can play a slot defensive back type role. He had a great week. Caleb Banks is going to be a first-round pick. Had a lot of questions about him, the defensive tackle out of Florida, because of injury. He came here, and he looked like he was as fresh as a daisy. Sometimes you have concerns about guys who are injured, and he showed up all 3 days. And the last name I'll mention is T.J. Parker, who probably solidified himself as top 15 pick, the edge rusher at Clemson. Didn't have the year 2025 that he did in 2024. He practiced all 3 days. And, Chris, one of the things we saw this year that we haven't seen in recent years are guys that are almost certainly first-round picks, not only showing up and practicing, but practicing every single day and on top of that, balling out. So shout out to Caleb and TJ for doing that, because I think they really helped themselves last week in Mobile.
I want to talk about those guys on the defensive side of the ball and the dynamic of this year's draft as it relates to the two sides of the ball in a minute, but people love quarterbacks, and we talked Nussmeier for just a second there. You mentioned he won MVP. How is the rest of the quarterback class starting to stack itself up behind Fernando Mendoza? Because all of the mocks that we've seen to this point, most of the mocks we've seen to this point, have Ty Simpson as a late first rounder, maybe to a place like Pittsburgh or the Rams, or But then you do have, a more experienced guy who might not knock your socks off, but has high-level experience like a Carson Beck. You've got Nussmeier. You've still got the wild card of Trinidad Chambliss. And some of the other names that we thought coming into this year may be high-end draft capital, like Drew Aller, Cade Klubnik. Just how is the quarterback class stacking up, in your opinion? Because a lot of us have dogged it, to be honest, as we enter this draft cycle.
Yeah, and you mentioned a lot of the names, Chris, that we had hoped 8-9 months ago were going to take off when they returned to school. The Drew Allers of the world, the Cade Klubniks, who ended up going to the Shrine Bowl, Garrett Nussmeier, who we've talked about, and all those guys probably right now, if we're being honest with ourselves, are going to be day 3 picks. So I think Ty Simpson's going to find his way into the first round just because the lack of scarcity of quarterbacks. And here's the thing. He only started 15 games at Alabama. And when you look at the list of guys, former first-round picks that started 15 or fewer games, it's Anthony Richardson, it's Mitch Trubisky, and it's Dwayne Haskins. So not a list that you want to be bragging about if you're thinking about taking a guy that early who has played so little football. The difference is that Ty Simpson, in terms of his ability to process before the snap and after the snap, was at a different level from any of those 3 quarterbacks. And he's going to have a chance. He may not get past the Jets at 16. You talk about the Steelers at 21. The Rams have 2 first-round picks as well. I think he finds his way into the first round. Another name you mentioned, I think, that's sort of been flying under the radar, and this season didn't certainly end with the throw he wanted to make. But Carson Beck is probably going to end up being QB3. He'll probably go on day 2. And I think we saw a closer version of Carson Beck in 2025 that we thought we'd see at Georgia the year before. I was talking to his center, James Brockermeyer, at the Senior Bowl, and he could not say enough good things about that young man. And I talked to people at Georgia that were okay seeing him leave a year ago, and Brockermeyer said that the level at which he plays above the neck is going to make him a pretty easy transition to the next level. I think, like most things, it just fit's going to matter. Like if he goes to the Browns versus going to the Rams, we can sort of figure out what his career may look like. But after that, it's wide open. Taylor Green was at the Senior Bowl last week, 6'6", all day long, 35-inch arms, fantastic athlete, has to reduce the turnovers. Nussmeier is going to be sub 6'1". That's just what God gave him. And here's something I come back to in talking about Nussmeier is he, if you had, I'll ask you, I asked this last week, if you had to rank Kyle McCord, Will Howard, and Garrett Nussmeier in terms of how you would stack them on your draft board, what does that look like? And my follow-up before you answer, Chris, will be, well, we can't have them in a top 50 conversation if that draft board looks similar.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great point you make because I'd probably have Will Howard ahead of Nussmeier and then sandwiched between Howard and McCord. And so you make a great point. If Will Howard's a 5th-round pick, what's that mean for Garrett Nussmeier?
Absolutely. And the thing with Will Howard is he's 6'5". We know he can win with physicality and running the ball, which is what he did at Ohio State. He has room for growth as a passer. We'll see how that works out with Mike McCarthy. Nussmeier's a coach's son, and when he's on and not turning the ball over, that shows up. The other issue is you applaud him for his toughness on one hand. On the other hand, he struggles to stay healthy. So you have to sort that out. And he's going to have to be at 6 feet. He's not athletically what Baker is, doesn't have Baker's arm. He's not athletically what Johnny Manziel was at his best. So he's traditional pocket passer, and you have to figure out how to make that work with that size and some of the physical limitations. I love this tape coming into 2024. It just didn't work out for him and just about everybody else at LSU, including Brian Kelly, of course. So the quarterback class feels closer to the 2022 version where we've talked a lot about Kenny Pickett being the only first-round pick. I think it ends up being better than that, maybe 3 or 4 years down the road, but this is not going to be a situation where we see 6 guys go in the top 12 like we did with the 2024 class.
I mentioned the wild card of Chambliss, too. If he does end up in the draft, where does he get slotted into this mix?
Yeah, and I've talked to teams that think he has a chance to be a day 2 pick given the way he played down the stretch. It is interesting that he wants to go back to school for 1 more year, so maybe he's heard things that I have not yet been privy to, and maybe that informed his decision. It's funny what the NCAA decides is and aren't rules. And, we got Dabo calling people out, but we're concerned about Trinidad Chambliss playing another season in an era where COVID has allowed people to go back to school. Bro, I was talking to guys that were 27 last week in Mobile, and they weren't just punters and kickers. So, it seems like a weird hill to die on for the NCAA, but certainly not the weirdest. So we'll see with Trinidad. I think his options are going to be good either way. Should he be allowed to go back to college for another year at Ole Miss, it looks like, or if he comes out, because I think he's going to have a chance in this light quarterback class to be one of the first 3 or 4 or 5 guys taken.
Ryan Wilson, NFL draft analyst for CBS Sports. Check out the With the First Pick pod as well, which is really going to get ramped up here, as you mentioned, with less than 3 months to go until the draft, about 3 weeks to the combine in Indy. I mentioned the dynamic because the three of the first names you brought up when we talked about the talent you noticed at the Senior Bowl down in Mobile this week were all defensive side of the ball. And we're in a year where our 2 Super Bowl teams are there, I think, because of their defenses, right? New England's playoff defense has been impeccable. Seattle's defense the entire season really was the best in the league, and that's how we end up with Sam Darnold against Drake May. That's not a knock on Sam Darnold or Drake May. It's just how we end up in a Super Bowl without a Burrow, a Jackson, a Mahomes, or a Hurts, or a Stafford, or Allen, any of the other names we could throw out there, elite quarterbacks in the NFL, or top rung quarterbacks in the NFL. Do you feel like there's any chance that we're pivoting because of the dearth of quarterback talent available, not just in the draft this year, but the free agency class as well in the NFL, that we're pivoting maybe to a lot more teams looking defense first, not just in the draft, but in free agency and how they build out their rosters this year?
No, that's a great point. And, the timing isn't great. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah just got fired as the Vikings GM. Yeah. But their plan with J.J. McCarthy, the story keeps changing. Once someone gets fired, there's a lot of stories that come out that may not actually track. But the initial story was we're going to get a quarterback on his rookie deal and build around him. And when you're not having $55 million per year tied up in a quarterback, that gives you a lot of leeway to build up around that quarterback. It didn't work in Minnesota, but we saw it work back in the day with the Seahawks when Russ Wilson was on that rookie deal. And we've seen other places where it's been successful, most recently the New England Patriots, where to your point, you're not taking knocks at Sam Darnold or Drake May. If you had said in August that that's going to be the Super Bowl, you would have been locked up. But the defenses on both those sides have been so good, and certainly Seattle perhaps a little better getting after the quarterback than New England. But you talk about Mike Vrabel and Mike Macdonald. And I remember talking to teams that interviewed Mike Macdonald prior to him taking that job in Seattle about how sharp he was. Different. Like he's a math guy. He's not your prototypical old school John Goodman football coach. But how different he was in a truly impressive way. We know Mike Vrabel's more of a leader of men, and he's been around the league since the 90s. But I think the underlying message is this. It can be offense or defense, but if you can motivate grown men who have families and mortgages to do what you need them to do, that's the biggest step you have to make. And if you have a quarterback on his rookie deal, even better. Sam Darnold obviously got paid in Seattle, but they're making it work with cheaper talent at other positions. So we're in a league where, we follow sort of what's working. So I would not be surprised if we see a lean in to more defensive-minded coaches. But I think that the more important takeaway is you have to be able to lead these guys. And we knew Mike Vrabel could do that. I would imagine the Titans would rather rehire him if they could. We saw it with Tomlin. You see it with Harbaugh, so on and so forth.
So let me ask you this, Ryan, because with the interesting quarterback matchup that we have in the Super Bowl, again, it kind of leads us back to talking about templates because, like you mentioned, copycat league. I think most professional sports leagues are. Teams see other teams find success with a template. They want to try and follow it. I'm not suggesting that there's a quarterback available on the trade market or in free agency this year who could be in the Super Bowl next year. Sam Darnold's climb back has been multiple years now. But if there were a quarterback who's available in trade to Kyler Murray maybe, or in free agency, a Malik Willis, a Mac Jones, those kind of guys, is there one that you look at and say, okay, in the right system, with the right coaching, like you just talked about, this guy could breathe new life into his career in a new spot next year?
It's interesting, the names you mentioned there, and I'll throw out a one or two more. I have less faith in Kyler Murray or Tua Tagovailoa should they relocate, just because everything has to be perfect for Tua in terms of the weather, essentially, and the protection. He's not going to win with his legs, and we know the concerns with concussions. And we heard Darren Waller say this a few weeks ago that Tua at practice was a Hall of Famer. Tua in the games, once people started getting hit, looked like he was gun shy, and it wasn't necessarily a conscious decision by Tua. That aside, Kyler has to be in the right system. When Jacoby Brissett outplays you in the offense you're running, that's problematic. You mentioned, look, man, Malik Willis and Matt LaFleur made it work, and I think they deserve equal credit. So if you're on the Sean McVay tree, perhaps there's a place where Malik Willis can have that success. If you send him to a terrible team, we know what the results are going to be. Mac Jones, there were murmurs prior to learning that Adolfo Menso had been fired that Mac Jones might be tied to the Vikings. He has one more year left on his deal, so they have to be a trade. But the idea of KOC and Mac together, it makes as much sense as Mac and Kyle Shanahan together. I think it makes a lot of sense. And one other name I'll mention, as I was looking through the list of quarterbacks who are going to be up for their deals or free agents, Chris, and I don't know if this would happen because I know the Bears like him, but Tyson Bagent is a guy that the Bears absolutely love, who had to spot start as a D2 quarterback, who looked completely and utterly overwhelmed at the Senior Bowl a few years ago, who was played out of his mind when given an opportunity. And he's one of those sort of young guys that no one's really talking about, off the radar, and you get the third-round pick for him, and next thing you know, you have a starter for the next 5 or 6 years. I want to see what happens with him should those conversations be had, because I think I would prefer him or Malik or Mac over the two guys, Kyler and Tua.
That's an interesting point about Bagent, hard knock superstar. The other template is the second-year quarterback who helps drag his team up out of the basement, Drake May in New England. And obviously, look, you mentioned Vrabel and everything that's gone into that there in New England. If we look at this year's first-year rookie starting quarterbacks, and the only three that really played a good amount are Ward, Dart, and Shuck. Which of those three do you think is in the best position to make a leap in year two?
I thought Cam Ward outplayed his stats week in and week out. When we went back and watched him, there was some help from the rookie class, Alec Ayaminor and Jamari DK and Gunnar Helm, who were all drafted in the same class as Ward. They were helpful, but they need a difference maker at wide receiver, and they need some help along the offensive line. I think Robert Saleh is a good hire. I think Brian Dable's a great hire to take Cam's game to the next level. There's some other issues that need to be worked out in that organization. That's why they were picking as high as they were. But I think he's off to a great start. I'll be honest, I am concerned, maybe not quite to that level of the meaning of that word, with Jackson Dart's inability to take huge hits. And we'll see what it looks like with John Harbaugh. John Harbaugh has never had to develop a quarterback. He had Joe Flacco and Lamar Jackson, and that's no knock on John Harbaugh. That's just the hand he was dealt, and it's a pretty good hand. We'll see if he can surround Jackson Dart with guys that can get him where he needs to get to. I think Jackson Dart's a really good player. I thought he was a second-round pick coming out, and I still think he's a second-round pick. I know Giants fans get extremely angry when you mention that, but we'll see. He's got to stay healthy. And then Tyler Shuck, I owe him an apology. I thought he was a day 3 pick. He was an older prospect, battled injuries and inconsistency at every stop he made in college. And all he did was get better each and every week. Whether he's 26 or 46, he's a fantastic athlete, big arm, 6'5". He played so well that the Saints aren't even sniffing around the idea of taking a quarterback. And I think that's a testament to him and Kellen Moore. I think he has room for even more growth if they can help him out there in New Orleans. But all three guys, some more than other, exceeded my expectations. And sometimes you can find quarterbacks in the second round. It's extremely rare, but it feels like the Saints did that with Shuck.
Ryan Wilson, NFL draft analyst for CBS Sports. Check out the With the First Pick pod as well, as we are now firmly entrenched in the offseason in the NFL. I know there's a game next Sunday, but 30 of 32 teams are already looking to the future. Last thing I wanted to ask you before I let you run, Ryan, since you were in Mobile, you got to watch the practices outside of the quarterback position and outside of defense, which you were already pretty specific on. Who else sort of jumped off the page and you looked at it and said, okay, that guy just made himself some money?
Yeah, there's some wide receivers to keep an eye on, and a couple guys weren't there that I was hoping to see. Casey Concepcion, who's a 5'10", 5'11", slide outside return guy from Texas A&M by way of NC State. He's going to have a chance to be a top 40-ish pick. But guys like Ted Hurst out of Georgia State, 6'3", long arms, was – people were murmuring, and I didn't say it out loud, but I was thinking it. You get some George Pickens vibes watching him in terms of his ability to high point the ball. He can run in a straight line, but he can also move a little bit for someone that size. Malachi Fields out of Notre Dame is a similar type player. I don't think he's quite the athlete, but a big body, down the field catch machine. He stuck out. There was the tight ends had a good week. There were some guys that are both in line and guys that can line up in the slot that did some things. And I'm trying to think. There's another wide receiver that I wanted to mention. Oh, my guy Tyron Montgomery, who played at John Carroll University, Division III, was at Nicholls State prior to that. I talked to him. I wrote about it on CBSSports.com. It's an amazing story. Didn't start playing football till his junior year of college, and I double-checked college. He walked on at LSU to play basketball. His mom got sick and then decided to go the football route. And he's 5'11", plays like he's 6'2". Big scouts are raving about him. He's going to have a chance to be a day 3 guy and come in right away and be a contributor because he is literally just scratching the surface on what he can become. But an example of a guy who went to the American Bowl, balled out there, graduated to the Senior Bowl, and balled out there. Again, he said he hadn't seen man coverage since he was at Nicholls State because at D3 John Carroll, they were double and triple teaming him in zone coverages. So he hit the ground running. It was a fun little story to watch unfold last week.
Great stuff, Ryan. Appreciate your time as always. Really looking forward to the first pick pod as we're now 3 weeks from the combine and less than 3 months to the draft. Thanks for making time today. We appreciate it.
Always good to see you, Chris.
Absolutely. Ryan Wilson, NFL draft analyst for CBS Sports. Go check him out there. Like I said, he was down in Mobile for the Senior Bowl practices and had a ton of great insight, as you just heard there, because, like I said, as soon as the confetti hits the ground in Santa Clara on next Sunday night, bang, all 32 teams are pivoted and turned in the same direction. Seattle and New England will jump on board regardless of the outcome Sunday in Super Bowl 60. Westwood One Sports is your home for Super Bowl 60. Chris Mack in for Nick Kostos on You Better You Bet countdown to kickoff. I want to talk about that quarterback class that Ryan just gave us some insight on, because I don't understand why the one name keeps getting mentioned where it's being mentioned. It doesn't add up for me, and I'll tell you why. That's next, right here on Westwood One Sports.
We'll be right back with You Better You Bet countdown to kickoff, presented by BetMGM. Make it legendary.
This is You Better You Bet, presented by BetMGM.
Chris Mack in for Nick Kostos here on You Better You Bet. Countdown to kickoff, presented by BetMGM. Make it legendary. Nick arriving in California shortly for a week on Radio Row at Super Bowl 60 ahead of Seahawks Patriots. We are counting down to the week of the Super Bowl here because this is when it gets serious. It's already done and over, and 30 other teams have pivoted toward looking ahead to 2026, including the NFL Draft. Just had a great conversation with Ryan Wilson of CBS Sports that you could go back and check out when you get the opportunity to, and check out all of his stuff at cbssports.com. Ryan Wilson was down in Mobile for the Senior Bowl. He tells us that one guy in particular is still slated to be the second quarterback off the board at this year's draft. I don't get it. I don't understand it. I don't see it. I think a lot of people think that he'll be good by default. Doesn't add up for me. I'll tell you who I'm talking about in just a minute here on You Better You Bet Countdown to Kickoff. But this was amazing last night. So just full disclosure, I am not a massive boxing fan. Okay, I'm not Ariel Helwani. I'm not Max Kellerman. I'm not Dan Canobio. I'm not watching every fight that's out there. I don't know who the contenders are at the top of each division. I'm just not. I watched the Royal Rumble yesterday. Okay, that's more my speed. WWE, sports entertainment. By the way, Roman Reigns winning the Rumble. What are we doing? Sorry, not to get off on a tangent at all. I am not a big boxing fan. I'll watch it if it happens beyond, or if it's a real big marquee fight. And those don't seem to come along nearly as often as they used to anymore. Really, it's about Jake Paul getting beat up on Netflix, or paying Mike Tyson to, allegedly paying Mike Tyson to fall down on Netflix. Anyway, there was a fight last night at Madison Square Garden. It's not notable for the outcome of the fight whatsoever. It's notable now because it's gone viral for one of the strangest things. And I remember where I was when I saw Mike Tyson bite half of Evander Holyfield's ear off. This goes down, though, as maybe the strangest thing I've ever seen in a boxing ring.
His head, Sergio! Wow! That is going to make the rounds on social media. That's like a cartoon. Oh, my goodness gracious. It is a toupee. And he just took it up and threw it into the crowd.
Jarrell Big Baby Miller was in the middle of a heavyweight fight last night at Madison Square Garden. Kingsley Iba hit him so hard with an uppercut at one point that Miller's toupee flew off. Yes, he was in the boxing ring with a toupee. It didn't fly all the way off, by the way. This wasn't like Maury's wigs in Goodfellas. This was glued on, and it like flipped the lid on his toupee. So it was still hanging on at the back of his head, flapping in the breeze. And he ended up ripping it off and chucking it into the crowd, and actually was interviewed multiple times after the fight. It was a pretty good sport about it. Helps that he won the fight. But I've seen, go find it if you have not yet on social media. Just type in Jarrell Miller toupee. It is one, easily the craziest thing I've ever seen in a boxing ring. And again, I remember watching Mike Tyson bite half of Evander Holyfield's ear off years ago. But that's easily the most viral moment from anything that happened in sports yesterday. We have it here for you on You Better You Bet. You're welcome. We live to serve. With Super Bowl 60 now a week away, as I mentioned, once the confetti hits the ground, Seattle and New England will join the other 30 teams in pivoting and looking ahead to the 2026 season. And that includes the draft. Your offseason timeline, just as a reminder, goes like this. Combine 3 weeks from now in Indianapolis. At about the same time, or shortly followed by free agency in early March. After free agency, we will then have that sort of 4 to 5 week period we have of pro days, private workouts, and guys maneuvering their way up and down the draft board as teams try to figure out what they're going to target in the 2026 NFL draft. There are plenty of teams that in any other year would probably take a swing on a quarterback in the first round. But this year's quarterback class is Fernando Mendoza. And then a bunch of guys. And it's not meant to discount what I think some of these guys could be at the NFL level. I think Carson Beck could be a stopgap starter, career backup, 1B level quarterback in the NFL. I don't think he's going to be a superstar unless he ends up in a perfect situation, perfect coaching. Same is probably going to be said for Garrett Nussmeier, who won MVP of the Senior Bowl yesterday down in Mobile. Really like Nussmeier coming into the season. We could argue that things didn't break his way, and he still bounced back, like I said, in the Senior Bowl practices this week and the game yesterday to make the most of that opportunity. And maybe we shouldn't fault him for injuries and his coach getting fired and everything else that happened at LSU this year. But he had an opportunity to really leap from edge first-round prospect into Mendoza territory, and he didn't. So with Dante Moore going back to Oregon, it really leaves Beck, Nussmeier, and some of the other dudes we mentioned with Ryan Wilson earlier, right? Klubnik, Aller. Trinidad Chambliss seems like he's going to do everything he can to not enter the draft this year and instead go back to Ole Miss, although that's still being litigated. The one name, for some reason, we keep hearing over and over again as the second quarterback off the board is Ty Simpson of Alabama. And I don't get it. I don't. Maybe it's just, like I've mentioned before, the dearth of talent in this quarterback class. And so by default, Ty Simpson is pegged as the second best quarterback on the board. But I don't think that means Ty Simpson should be going in the first round, as some people are talking about. And all due respect to those people that are projecting Ty Simpson as a late first-round quarterback, like Ryan Wilson, who we just had on. That's his opinion and the opinion of many people around the league, who it's very likely, some of which are smarter than me, right? Like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I'm the smartest guy in the world. But I've watched Ty Simpson play football. And I watched Ty Simpson play football during consequential games down the stretch. And the only game where he didn't look bad after Halloween, okay, maybe I'm stretching that a bit because I think the LSU game was the weekend after Halloween. But most of November and December, all the way through to New Year's Day, Ty Simpson had one good game in his final 5 games of consequence. I'm not counting Eastern Illinois. Sorry. Did not have a great game against Auburn. I know it's 3 touchdowns, no picks, but it was an efficient game. I'm going to damn with faint praise there. Obviously, the loss in the SEC championship game to Georgia, ugly. The win in Norman against the Sooners was better. That game against the Hoosiers in the Rose Bowl was, bad does not even begin to describe it. Disastrous. And I can't go all the way back to the Wisconsin game, the Vanderbilt game, and go, oh, yeah, that's more likely the guy that we're going to get. Yeah. That's worth a first-round pick. Sorry, I don't see it in Ty Simpson. I see the guy that we got in the SEC championship game against Georgia. I see the guy that we got against Indiana in the Rose Bowl. That's what I think is much more likely to happen to Ty Simpson at the NFL level. You wouldn't catch me spending someone else's first-round pick on Ty Simpson, much less my own, if I were an NFL general manager. I'm sorry. Again, in talking about this quarterback class, Ryan Wilson, who was on earlier, I thought made a really interesting comparison to that 2022 quarterback class where Kenny Pickett went in the first round. And then everyone sat around for several rounds until we got Malik Willis. Kenny Pickett going in the first round of that draft was an abomination. Terrible mistake by the Pittsburgh Steelers. That, as we can all see, has set back their contending curve because they haven't been able to find the answer at quarterback. And I think Ty Simpson going in this year's first round, much like J.J. McCarthy going in the first round, much like every year you see a quarterback get taken in the first round or way too early because that position gets overheated in the draft. And everybody's desperate for their quarterback. Don't let desperation force you into a pick of a quarterback in the back of the first round this year. I don't think anybody should do it. Get through Thursday night at the draft. Wake up Friday morning. Spend Friday afternoon thinking about it. And then maybe, just maybe, if you really need a young quarterback, Friday night, if you've got a couple of picks, you spend one on a quarterback. But I still wouldn't take Simpson on the second day of the draft. That's where I'd pivot to maybe a Beck or a Nussmeier. Maybe if you woke up on Saturday morning, going into the third day of the draft, you could convince me to take a look at Ty Simpson. I see the guy that we got late in the season. Maybe it's me being a victim of recency bias. But that's what I remember about Ty Simpson. And again, only 15 starts. I'll take the experienced Carson Beck, who, yes, we know is capable of mistakes. But I'll take the experience of Carson Beck if I'm looking for a quarterback, especially if I'm looking for someone who can play sooner rather than later. That's where I would pivot and look towards, rather than spending first-round draft capital on Ty Simpson. No thanks. It is You Better You Bet Countdown to Kickoff, presented by BetMGM. Make it legendary here on Westwood One Sports. I'm Chris Mack, in for Nick Kostos, live across North America on Sirius XM Channel 375. Coming up next, we laughed, we cried, we learned some things. The 3 stars of the day as we wrap it up next here on You Better You Bet Countdown to Kickoff on Westwood One Sports.
We'll be right back with You Better You Bet Countdown to Kickoff, presented by BetMGM. Make it legendary.
This is You Better You Bet, presented by BetMGM.
Chris Mack in for Nick Kostos today on You Better You Bet Countdown to Kickoff. Presented by BetMGM. Make it legendary, live wherever you may be on Westwood One Sports and in the Westwood One Sports app, including all across North America on Sirius XM Channel 375. Appreciate each and every one of you hanging out with us here today as we're now 7 days away from kickoff of Super Bowl 60. Nick will be live from Radio Row all week long, 9 a.m. to noon Eastern every day with You Better You Bet here on Westwood One Sports. And, of course, Westwood One, your home for Super Bowl 60 next Sunday night. Tonight, though, the NHL taking advantage of the lull in the NFL window, I guess it is, in the NFL schedule, with the Stadium Series game in Tampa. And it's actually going to be pretty chilly in Tampa. I think I saw game time temperatures are going to be right around 40 degrees, I think it is. So the Bruins and the Lightning in the Stadium Series at Raymond James Stadium in Tampa may actually feel like hockey weather, which is wild. Good timing by the NHL. I checked because I was curious about this. Road team has actually won 2 of the last 3 outdoor games in the NHL. And I like the Bruins tonight. Bruins started the season terribly. In fact, their only other meeting against the Lightning was way back in the second week of October when they lost at home to the Lightning 4-3, and it kicked off a 6-game losing streak. But Boston has turned things around, especially in the new year. They're on a 2-game winning streak. They've won 4 out of 5, and now 12 out of their last 14 or something like that, 10 out of their last 12. Point is, Bruins have figured a lot out, and I'm going to be betting the Bruins tonight in the outdoor game on the road in Tampa, plus 180 on the money line, and we'll go with the road team in the Stadium Series game between the Bruins and the Lightning. If you're betting that, maybe you're betting NBA action with the lull in the NFL schedule due to the bye week before the Super Bowl. BetMGM players, you'll get a no-sweat token to apply to any bet on the NBA. To use the token, add a bet on an NBA event to your bet slip and activate the token. If your bet loses, you'll get bonus bets. Download the BetMGM app today, and please gamble responsibly. So we laughed, we cried, we learned some things. Your biggest winners of the day with today's 3 stars. Let's go.
3.
Just know they're going to let it keep it to Garrett Nussmeier. He pulled it and took it to the house. Garrett Nussmeier with the first touchdown of the 77th Panini Senior Bowl.
Garrett Nussmeier, the MVP of yesterday's Senior Bowl. And look, it's the Senior Bowl. I'm not going to put too much on it. But I do think it's interesting to see Nussmeier have a really strong week of practice by all accounts from those who were down there. And then a good performance in the game as well, leading into the Combine 3 weeks away, and then I imagine a private workout at some point or a pro day at LSU. That's a guy I have pegged as a riser through the pre-draft process. Based off the way everybody felt about him going into the season, everything he dealt with during the season, injuries, head coach getting fired, and now starting to look like he's on the rise again in the pre-draft process. Nussmeier, here you go. Bold prediction. Save this for freezing cold takes when it doesn't happen. I'm going to bet Garrett Nussmeier when I get the opportunity to bet this. It's not out there yet. As the second quarterback off the board in the NFL draft. What do you think of that, Ty Simpson lovers? All right, number 2 star.
2.
I think Ty Simpson's going to find his way into the first round just because the lack of scarcity of quarterbacks. And here's the thing. He only started 15 games at Alabama. And when you look at the list of guys, former first-round picks that started 15 or fewer games, it's Anthony Richardson, it's Mitch Trubisky, and it's Dwayne Haskins. So not a list that you want to be bragging about.
Yeah, that was Ryan Wilson, NFL draft analyst for CBS Sports, on with us earlier in the show here on You Better You Bet, Countdown to Kickoff. And the back half of that comment is the part that I want to focus on. Because lots of people around the league, Ryan included, who was down in Mobile at the Senior Bowl, a lot of people around the league are mentioning that Ty Simpson still looks like the second quarterback off the board and could go off the board in the first round. I just gave you my fiery hot Garrett Nussmeier take. I think that note at the end there about only having 15 starts and the other quarterbacks who have been drafted in the first round to have that track record, what they have done, is exactly why people will cool on Ty Simpson. Because none of those quarterbacks had appreciable success at the NFL level. Anthony Richardson, jury is still out. But Trubisky and Haskins never really got it together at the NFL level either. And I think that may sour people on Simpson as we get a little bit closer to the NFL draft in late April in Pittsburgh. Our number 1 star of the day.
1.
His head, Sergio!
Wow! That is going to make the rounds on social media. That's like a cartoon.
Oh, my goodness gracious.
It is a toupee.
And he just took it up and threw it into the crowd.
Jarrell Miller, in his heavyweight bout at Madison Square Garden last night, got hit so hard at one point that the flap got unglued on the front of his toupee. And it was just hanging on by a thread right there at the back of his head. As you heard the announcers there, he then ripped it off and threw it into the crowd, finished the fight with just that little baby ring of hair at the front of his head. God bless the man for embracing it and making the most of it and having fun with it in interviews after the fight. Again, probably a lot easier to joke about it since he did win the fight. But that's got to be the craziest thing I've ever seen in a boxing ring. I mean, ever. You can argue with me about Mike Tyson biting Evander Holyfield, and maybe we could put those on the same level. But the fact that not only did the man's toupee come loose and flap around there for a second, but then he ripped it off and chucked it into the crowd. Jarrell Miller, Big Baby Miller, gets the number 1 star of the day here on You Better You Bet. Countdown to Kickoff. Chris Mack in for Nick Kostos. As mentioned, Westwood One is your home for Super Bowl 60, and Westwood One Sports, the place to get geared up for the big game all week long. You Better You Bet will be live every day from Radio Row out in the Bay Area. Super Bowl 60 in Santa Clara a week from tonight on Westwood One. Seahawks, Patriots. I'm still sticking with the thought that the only way the Patriots win is to force multiple turnovers out of Sam Darnold. They do that, they got a shot. Otherwise, I think Seattle wins comfortably, like double digits comfortably. And yes, I've still got some bets on Seahawks defensive players for Super Bowl MVP. We're due for that. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, everyone. Once again, appreciate each and every single one of you for joining us here on You Better You Bet. Countdown to Kickoff. Keep it here all weekend long and all week leading up to Super Bowl 60. Your home, Westwood One Sports.